Well, hey there, idiots. Welcome back to Observe and welcome back to part 2 of the analysis of the leaders of the Twin Flames universe cult. This is, like I said, the second part, so if you haven't watched the first part, go and check that out first. For now, let's go ahead and roll the intro. Okay, so since this is part 2, I am not going to be including the backstory and context and everything that is in the first video. If you would like to see that, go and check out that video. We're going to go ahead and dive into the analysis on this one.
Your concept, the way I've seen it, is that a divine masculine cannot be in a feminine body, that body has to change to a man.
Not true.
Really?
That's correct.
So you've never suggested that somebody was in the wrong body, that they were actually a divine masculine and not a divine feminine?
So we invite people to explore their gender polarity.
It's been a week since I've recorded anything around these two, and immediately I'm just thrust directly back into being extremely frustrated with them. So the interviewer is asking very pointed questions here, and the reason that they're so pointed is because they're based in evidence that already exists. There's video footage, there's emails, there's text spaces that are centered around this that support these questions that she's asking. So that's why she's so quickly going to, really? And that sort of confusion, because immediately they are backtracking on their own words, which again, go and check out the first video. This will add so much context to this one. But then they're also already using this phrase that they have stuck to religiously throughout all of this interview is an invitation to explore, which if you've watched the first video, that invitation to explore is very kind and open-minded and kind-hearted and things like that. But the way that they enforced it was where the problematic behavior started to come in. There was a lot of ostracization, a lot of aggressive call-outs, there was yelling, verbal abuse, the list goes on there. So for them to say, oh, we just invited them to explore is, while verbally technically true, completely false when it actually comes to practicality and how the effect of those words came into play. I have a lot of difficulty remaining unbiased during this. I get frustrated very quickly with these two, so throughout this, I will try to maintain my level-headedness as much as possible, but I do apologize in advance for the times where it's very clear that I have difficulty with these people. Regardless, we're gonna go through and we're gonna see what we can from their nonverbal communication.
But Jeff, if you have an element of control over them or sway over them,
Okay.
and they hear you say that, and they know that it will please you,
That's not the relationship. It's not the relationship we invite. We're not inviting people to please us. We're inviting people to explore their spirituality, to look within themselves, to have their own personal relationship with God. It's not about me. It's never been about me. I don't want it to be.
It's laughable. It is laughable what he's saying here. Here's this clip here.
I always choose to be happy, and I already am. And I want to keep being happy, and I never run away.
Not happy, you are numbed out. You cannot be happy without your twin flame.
But I am happy.
I've had about enough of that, Marie-Sophie. I've had about enough of your disrespect of me.
It's getting pretty old. Well,
I will not be abused by you, Marie-Sophie. You don't know better than God. And you must surrender to him.
And then to also follow that point up, here is a whole slew of him talking about his wealth and the best things that have happened out of the money that he's gotten from this stuff as well. So there's that for some context.
Most people don't, the first car they learn to drive on is not $100,000 Porsche Cayenne S.
It is for me.
Yo, I'm rich. Well, this is my house. This is the back of it. This is my pool, my slide, my little hot tub, 85-inch TV screen. I could purchase one of those every single week. $15,000 in crystals here. It's a good life. Let's license this, this training program to the military, and then I'll be a billionaire.
So now you're seeing where this laughable nature of what he's trying to claim here comes from. It's simply not true. He definitely is wanting people to follow him directly and make it all about him, and he revels in the attention and the power and the control that he gets from it. So him trying to say it's not about me, it's about the person, it's just a bold-faced lie. And the way that you can hear that non-verbally in that as well is you can hear the pace of his speaking increase dramatically. This means that there's agitation, there's more passion behind it. But what you also notice is that it's starting to increase in pitch and strain behind his voice. It's not about me, it's about this, and it's about that, and it's about this. And so you hear that agitation coming in there. So obviously that's not quite the case, as also shown by the evidence already prior to this interview.
I don't want it to be about me.
How many of them have transitioned with the suggestions from you or as part of the exploration with you?
In the beginning, there were quite a few. And that's, many of them.
I think
What kind of answer is that? In the beginning, there were quite a few that you more or less coerced into transitioning, oftentimes against their will and against how they actually felt as a human being. There were quite a few of them, and that's many of them. No, yes, that is.
I think from what, a lot of them have shared that they were feeling this way, like even prior to meeting us. Like
some of them broke down and cried when they got the news from you that they were actually divine masculines, even though they were women.
So it's not the correct framing. It's an invitation to explore.
I'm getting so fed up with this guy's religious sticking to it's an invitation to explore. Just because he was coached to say it's this so that he doesn't have any implications towards himself, it pushes all the burden of responsibility into everybody else around, does not mean that that is how the actual rubber hit the actual road. He did, in fact, invite to explore, but again, if that exploration didn't go with how these two designated it to be, there was immense negative pushback to that, and that no longer is just an invitation, that is a command. I'm sorry. I'm trying not to get more and more heated as this goes on, but it's frustrating for me.
Explore your gender polarity.
People who are no longer part of your community have said that they were told by you that they were a different gender. Are you saying that they misinterpreted what you were saying, or are you saying that I'm framing it in the wrong way?
I'm saying and telling you what we do in these circumstances.
It matters what they hear. So it's what you're putting out maybe is different from what they're hearing. And I'm just trying to figure out if that's...
So there's an ongoing dialogue, and we are responsible for our part of the relationship. I can't possibly be responsible for someone else's part of a relationship.
But if you tell some...
You can if you're the leader of that group. What? So this is just plain manipulation. He's the leader, there's the followers, so he has more responsibility. The burden is on him, and he cannot conceive of that. Either that or he can conceive of that, and he just refuses to accept that. So let's continue to see how this plays out.
If you tell somebody that they're the wrong gender, if they hear that, so you have former followers who believed that you told them that they needed to change their gender.
It's just... it's not fair, because the spirit of the community and the culture of the community is one of openness and dialogue and exploration and support, not this fearful, put you into the corner, you have to do this. It's just not true. This is difficult work.
Yeah, it was just...
So we've got the big manipulator coming in here. If you've watched the last video, you have seen that manipulator comes in specifically where it's a self-preening gesture. For those of you that do not know, self-preening gestures, it can be anywhere, any sort of self-preening gesture where it's a cleaning up of the presentation of oneself. It indicates that the person who is doing those self-preening gestures is hyper aware of how they're being perceived. And on top of that, it oftentimes can crop up at points of agitation. It's also a self-soothing gesture to be able to run your fingers through your hair. It's a calming sensation. That's a person subconsciously calming their limbic system down. And so we're seeing that come in regularly, and it always crops up around a negative or contentious point of the interview, and it's cropped up here again. And again, what he's done verbally is he's now trying to take all of this dialogue, this history that has been spoken about here, and he's trying to twist it around to where, in fact, he's the victim and his partner is the victim. They're the victims in this, when in reality, and how everybody can see from the outside in, they are the ones in absolute control of the situation. What they say, as according to them, is what God says. They have a direct connection to God. And what they say has to go as almost gospel. And so for this to then be spun around for where he's the victim, it's such clear and overt manipulation. It's disgusting. And again, it makes me so frustrated. I'm trying to keep my cool, and it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
Yeah, it was just an invitation to explore. And they were with us at the time when, we were their like direct guide, and we invited them to explore, and they could chose not to do it or not to, like
I guess they felt so invested in the community and felt so responsible for pleasing you both and listening to your words that if they didn't follow what you suggested, they would no longer be part of the community. And they were terrified of that because it had become their everything.
Yeah, we have enormous compassion for that. That's not
What's your response?
We have enormous compassion for that. You're seeing the micro no shakes during that. We're also seeing the narrowing of the eyes. That narrowing of the eyes has a multitude of emotional expression or meaning behind it. The most common one is centered around scorn. However, it can pop up in other areas where a person is trying to amplify a point, or they're trying to recollect a memory, something along those lines as well. So that's not guaranteed that in this area that narrowing of the eyes is scorn. However, the little micro no shakes to me are at least a low-lying red flag, because the no shake does not coincide with what's verbally being said. We have a lot of compassion for them. That would be a nod. We are doing ... It's a positive. It's reinforced by a nod, at least in the North American culture where these two grew up. So the nod means yes and the no shake means no. So for them to be doing we cared so much about them with those little micro no shakes in there, it could be seen as a point of desynchronization, meaning that he does not feel what he's saying there as indicated by his nonverbal communication. Again, for those of you that are new to the channel, the smaller the movement nonverbally, the less likely it is to be consciously controlled. If you do a big movement, you're likely consciously controlling that. But if you're seeing little tiny movements that are oftentimes very quick, those are less likely to be consciously controlled. So the fact that that's slipping out there makes me feel a little bit suspicious of that. And then the evidence around it, the context around that, adds even more clarity to it, as it's quite obvious that he does not mean what he's saying here, as shown by his actions rather than his words in this interview that they're trying to do to save face.
What's your responsibility in that as opposed to your compassion for it?
Well, as I said, I have enormous compassion for it, that if that was their experience. That's not what we aim to do. And there was never any opportunity for us to be able to address that if they were having that experience. Lots of
What's your responsibility in that instead of your compassion? That was the question, in case you missed that. His response is, well, like I said, I have compassion for that. Again, it's a very weaselly verbal dodge of responsibility, which encompasses how they behave. Even when posed with a very bold-faced, straightforward question about responsibility, they do everything in their power to avoid that responsibility. Then when he's going in to say, there was just never any chance for us to address things like that, it's not true at all. They had plenty of time to address things like that. In fact, not doing things like what they did is the best way to address the issues that it created. But that's not how it played out. They decided to become cult leaders, and now they're facing backlash for it. And now again, it's just so much manipulation and so overt, it's disgusting.
lots of upsets and difficult challenges come up along the way. And if you stop doing the spiritual work, one might get stuck in that upset and loop it in their mind. So
A lot of pleading in this. He's starting to have palms upwards. This is pleading behavior. You're also hearing, again, that strain in his voice, and the pitch is increasing. He's feeling anxious. He's also trying to take this victim mindset with this. And if they don't do the things, then maybe it could get to be a bad thing, and it's really all their responsibility. That's what he's driving around to. And that's simply not the case, not when you're the leader of the group. The followers of the group are not responsible for what the leader says. The leader is responsible for what the leader says, and oftentimes the leader is then responsible for what the followers do, because there's a power dynamic there that exists that he refuses to accept. Again, because it implicates him. I guarantee you, as we go through and as they do more interviews, he will never accept until it's a point that he can accept it in a way that makes him seem like a victim. And as soon as that way shows through, I guarantee you he will try to then accept. That doesn't really happen in this interview, but if it happens in the future, I've said it here.
So it's hard to see, that people had a negative experience with Twin Flames Universe and with us. And, we did our best to love them. We wish them well. We hope they find, the help that they seek. Once again, like, this is online. You can just close your browser.
And what about the allegation that you're teaching us?
Gotta give him credit for that line. It's online, you could just close your browser, but this is also still centered around that same sort of mindset of victim blaming. Oh, well, they can just leave whenever, or oh, this, or oh, that. It's always easier to state that from external, internal, and oftentimes it's based out of a level of misunderstanding of the situation or the implications around. And so with him saying, oh, well, they can just close out whenever they want is technically verbally true, but when you delve into the psychology of it, it's not nearly so black and white, but he wants to paint it out as black and white because, again, if he paints it out as black and white, he's able to manipulate better through that. Black and whites rarely exist in real human life, so anytime that this is painted out to be so, it's a little bit more suspicious and you have to pay attention to it to make sure it's not a manipulation point. Sure enough, it's a manipulation point for these two, and it's better to keep an eye out for any of those scenarios externally of that as well. Anyhow.
Teaching us validate on some level rape.
That's absurd. I'm sorry. That's absolutely absurd.
That if you're with your twin flame.
No, I'm sorry. I'm going to stop you there. There's absolutely no validity to that in any way. We strongly encourage people to respect people's boundaries. We have an enormous...
Again, the clip that I had already shown earlier of somebody saying, I am happy now, and him saying that you can't be happy without your twin flame and all this other garbage goes directly against what he's saying here. So now he's starting to get agitated. You can see that very clearly, and it's in the vein of anger, frustration, scorn along those lines. You're seeing the eyebrows drawing together, lowering. You're seeing disgust coming there in the corner of his nose pretty prevalently. There's no shakes in there. All of these different nonverbal indicators to push us down this vein of agitation, anger, frustration, what have you. He's scrambling and he's trying to mask that through anger. His insecurities are showing up in various nonverbal avenues here, and it's becoming continually more and more frustrating to watch.
Enormous respect for people and their sexuality, and we would never, ever encourage anything remotely close to that.
Yeah, that's really vile.
The idea that a twin flame union has a divine masculine and a divine feminine.
Sure.
And that the divine masculine should be able to have sex every day.
It's a consensual journey. I mean, like, that's common sense with sex. You have to be, both parties have to be willing and choose that. And if at some point during, the intercourse process, one party says, slow down, stop, I'm not comfortable, you should honor that.
Ha 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 ha. Funny joke, here's this clip.
Shalia's like in her closet, like getting ready, and I come up and I just want to give her a little kiss. I knew we needed to make out, right? And she's all, no, I don't want this. I threw her on the bed and jumped on top of her. No, get off of me, no. And then we were making out.
So this is a prime example of Jeff not accepting no as an answer, and also another prime example of Jeff going back directly on what he has presented from his own life in the past. All of these nonverbal indicators that we're seeing of self-soothing, of agitation, of the scorn and frustration and disgust are letting us know that we're on the right track. We're not misreading what Jeff is presenting nonverbally here. What we've done here is gotten a pretty decent understanding as to his nonverbal communication. So now as we're going through this interview, it's just overwhelmingly clear when he's manipulating. Let's just continue watching.
Honor that.
Because there's kind of a back and forth on a video with you where you're explaining that Shalia didn't want to have sex, but in a twin flame union, if one person does, then the other one sort of naturally does.
I'll let Shalia answer the question.
Yeah, yeah, it's very nuanced because, you know, I feel very like
She's having difficulty here because now we're getting down to some real things. Some things are really having effect here. And from what we're seeing here, her verbal patterning is falling apart. There's a lot of ums, there's a lot of hesitations, there's a lot of pausing, there's no force behind her words, letting us know that all of this is feeling rather insecure from her and rather uncollected from her. And the reason for that is because inevitably, Jeff has crossed her own personal boundaries on multiple occasions, as even shown in this very public documentary and the sessions that they've had here. And so trying to now be in a position, this is a gross thing that Jeff has done here of being like, oh, I'll just let the person who I've been behaving extremely inappropriately towards, I'll let them excuse excuse all of this behavior, which, like I said, that's gross. So now she's trying to scramble to try to find a way to marry her idea of free will and individualism with this twisted concept that Jeff has promoted and talked about and has no doubt carried out as well. Now, I'm not saying that Shalia is totally innocent in the situation. In fact, it seemed as though she brought the concept of this spiritual, new-aged mindset into their partnership. But that also being said, it seems as though it has now shifted away from being a balanced partnership to being more of this chauvinistic hierarchy style of partnership.
we're in a very intimate relationship. And so I have found that sometimes um if I didn't want to, but actually I did, he can kind of see that. And it's very healthy for us to have sex. And
None of this has confidence behind it. A lot of palms upwards, a lot of hesitation throughout. Again, we're hearing the difficulty behind the force of the words. We're seeing shrugs in there. And then even with it, she's still verbally wrestling with this so much of, there's been times that I didn't want to, stop, full stop. That's where it ends. If she doesn't want to, done, period, end of sentence, next paragraph, move on. That's where that stops. But that's not where it stops for them. She says, I didn't want to, but he saw that I did, which is not it. That's just not it. If she or if any partner says, I'm not in the mood for XYZ, that's where that discussion ends. You can ask and find out why, be on the same page or whatnot, but that's their boundary. They're done there. That's not how they function, and that's how they encouraged all of their followers to also function. Basically, what they're saying here and what they're trying desperately to excuse is no doesn't mean no. And you're seeing her wrestle through that, and it's heartbreaking to watch and it's infuriating to watch. And I'm sure you could gather that here. This is an awful job by me at being unbiased and super robotic and all of that stuff here. I can't let myself fall into that slot because this annoys me. It frustrates me to no end.
And it's always consensual. And at the end of the day, if it's a no, it's a no. I don't want to. But I have definitely, because we've been together so long, we're so intimate, I've come to trust him. And I know when he's saying maybe we should.
And it goes both ways too.
It goes both ways.
Sure, now he chimes in. It goes both ways. As soon as he can paint himself out to be the victim on this, obviously, again, she's struggling all the way through. Talked about that. Now it's coming around to a point where he could be like, oh, well, it goes both ways. And if that ever happens towards me, then that's just how it goes. That's not really going to ever be the case. It seems as though Jeff wants the control. He wants to tell people what to do. He wants to be the one who his word is, quite literally gospel. And so the fact that they're now trying to play it off as it goes both ways and it's exclusively coming from him and she has to agree, that lets us know this is another manipulation point. Jeff's going to try to be a victim here in this too.
It's both ways because sometimes I'm the one that's hey.
I'm like, no, I don't want to. No. She's like, come on, And often, it's true. It ended up being that it was better that we did.
It was better you did in the end.
And sometimes, it wasn't the case. And I say, firm no, and she respects that. And that's what we have in our relationship. And that's what we teach, toward in our community.
Yeah.
What's your definition
big lip compression there at the end. That's what we teach hard in our community. And then he ends it with that lip compression, which, again, for those of you that do not know, lip compression are often an indicator of biting back of some negative words or sentiments, emotions, what have you. So he's saying this thing, and then he does a lip compression in response to this.
What's your definition of a cult?
So, as far as I understand, there's not a agreed upon specific definition of a cult.
Pausing that there, that is a manipulator's way of trying to get around responsibility. What's your definition of the cult? Well, if you really think about how all of the cult stuff is defined, and if you think about all the details and the nuances that go into being a cult, it becomes really difficult to decide what the cult is. It's pretty easy to start going down the checklist of what does and doesn't define a cult, so for him to try to pull out and be like, it's hard to decide, lets us know he's the leader of a cult. Wow, I'm just so you know, I'm not an expert on cults here. There's probably plenty of people that are going to be in the comments that are experts on cults, but let me know in the comments of this video, is there something else that would really help define this? And is there anything that's pushing us away from deciding that the Twin Flames universe and all of its culty behaviors is actually not a cult? Let me know.
Of a cult. What my personal definition of a cult is a harmful organization, a group that extracts the well-being of its members in exchange for a delusion. And
you mean like saying that you're the Master Christ?
I pulled up a recent image of myself and put it next to that image of the supposed Jesus, and it's the same person. The image of the Christ was actually me, the second coming, not Jesus, the first coming.
And extracting happiness from the followers around you to be able to give you wealth and prosperity.
Fuck you. My business depends on all of you. And I want to make sure that all of you are doing your fucking jobs. Everyone's going to be looking at everyone else.
Is that what you're saying there, Jeff? It seems like that's what you're saying there. And if we're even going off of that, that fits exactly what you and Shalia are doing with Twin Flames Universe. Am I missing? Am I missing a detail? I feel like I have to be missing a detail because this seems really straightforward to me.
And doesn't let them go. And I can...
There it is, and doesn't let them go. That's his deciding line there, and doesn't let them go. And then he's gonna fall back on that and be like, oh, well, the Twin Flames universe is just online. You could just do whatever. Despite the fact that he has, in fact, invited people to move to the same plot of land that he's on to build this little thing about this cult and encouraging people to only be in relationship with each other within that cult and all of this. Wow.
And I can see how easy a target Twin Flames universe can be for that, because Twin Flames seems like such a fantastical idea.
That's not it, Jeff. That's not why it seems fantastical. Did you know that people can, in fact, believe in things like soulmates and twin flames without being a part of this little cult mindset? If somebody wants to believe that they have a soulmate, that's their right. They don't even have to believe that they have one soulmate. They could believe as many as soulmates as they absolutely want. That's a fantastic idea, but that's not what's causing people to think that Twin Flames universe is a cult, Jeff. It's everything else, and it's Jeff and Shalia. That's the reason that people are thinking that it's a cult.
Like, you have an ultimate lover. You have someone who's perfectly designed for you, that completes you in every way, that grows with you, that is your eternal complement. It is a divine, extraordinary concept. And I can see how people would be skeptical of such a concept.
But so that's like,
True statement. People can be skeptical of that sort of concept. It's definitely up for debate. There's no scientific proof for the existence of a soulmate or a twin flame or anything along those lines. People can feel however they want to feel. That's 1,000% it. And then again, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people out there that believe in soulmates, twin flames, that sort of concept. The person that you're supposed to be with, or persons that you're supposed to be with. That's not the argument. And again, to revisit, that's not the reason that people think that Twin Flames is a cult. It's because of everything else. But again, Jeff is trying to use his verbal communication here to manipulate around, shift responsibility, divert attention, anything that he can do to get it off of himself. It's very problematic.
like, are you guys cult leaders?
No.
No.
And a cult, like your description of a cult is extracting and with keeping people.
Just with that are you cult leaders? There's a big no. It seems as though there's some manipulators going on there. But then with that, we have a big, huge smile from Jeff in that. I'm wondering if people are going to be watching this thinking that this might be duping or duper's delight. I don't think so. That doesn't seem to fit here. I think he's trying to overtly act out the absurdity of that questioning. He's trying to be like, oh, well, how dare you? That's so silly. I'll laugh it off. I'm not a cult leader. He is. But he's trying to show that he's not through his nonverbal communication. And it's very overt and it's very stilted, which is where I'm feeling like it's not necessarily that duping or duper's delight.
Keeping people, extracting and keeping to their
Extracting their well-being
extracting their well.
for egoic purposes, and for a delusion, to feed a lie, to feed a delusion, and not letting them leave. Like turning them into some sort of farm, like the Matrix or something, a little mini version of the Matrix, or I don't know. I guess cults can be bigger. I'm not sure.
A lot of agitation coming out here. Got so many hair flips that are going on again. And again, he's trying to hang up this definition of a cult with the not allowing people to leave. It seems as though that's his one hinging factor, because he'll describe things that he's doing and then he'll describe this. But also don't forget that it's they don't let them to leave. And he tries to paint out the idea of a cult that is not realistically how the idea of a cult goes, but he's trying to make that difference verbally for us so that he's not a part of that group. However, legally, there's nothing that can be done about this, because the people that are going into this cult are going in there willingly, and he is technically correct. They have the physical capability of detaching. Now, the psychology around that makes it difficult for them to leave, he wants to omit, and unfortunately, when it comes down to the word of the law, it's much more difficult to implement or take that into consideration. He's trying to rely on that. The law cannot do anything about this, but fortunately, the court of public opinion can. We can look at this scenario, at this cult for what it is, and call it out for what it is. If people stop buying into the Twin Flames universe, well, then that will fizzle it out in and of itself. So it's kind of up to the public to decide the fate of this specific little cult.
But yeah, we're not that. We help people.
Yeah.
People are free to come and go as they please. It's as simple as clicking the X on your browser and never engaging again.
Yeah.
A lot of shrugging in there, not a lot of certainty, also leaning back, creating space between himself and the interviewer or the negative stimulus at that time. We're also seeing the venting behavior come in there. He's starting to perspire. This is all indicating agitation and uncertainty and a desire to create distance, and that lets us know a little bit of what's going on behind the scenes in his brain while he's trying to say, we didn't do any of that. We're just happy-go-lucky, really kind, loving people here, and anybody can leave whenever they want. Have I said that before? Anybody can exit out of the browser whenever they want. That's the thing that I want to make sure I communicate really loudly here and on repeat, because it's the only thing I could possibly conceive of that clears my name.
Yeah.
You absolutely deny ever telling somebody that they were a divine masculine when they were a woman.
We encourage people to explore.
No, but you've never said to somebody you were divine masculine.
We encourage people to explore. So your community.
Are you watching this as irritated as I am by this? Like, I'm getting genuinely heated here listening to this person be so greasy and so weaselly with what they're saying here. The reason that the interviewer is asking this and repeating and pushing and really not giving on this, which again, kudos to the interviewer throughout all of this. She does so well. And he refuses to take responsibility for what he himself and Shalia herself has said in their sessions and in their lessons. This invitation to explore thing is repeatedly regurgitated as if it's clearing them on any level. And for anybody who's watching that has the context, that understands and has been around this sort of talk and behavior, it's so clear that this is manipulation. It's becoming difficult for me to go through this without this just being a tirade. I apologize if you're watching this and you're feeling like this is biased. I'm really not trying to be biased with this. It's so hard to hear these sorts of manipulation tactics being used without getting frustrated by the people that feel like they're being smarter than everybody else. It's, I'm sorry. I'm going to continue through.
You're communicating more than just your words. And I hesitate to answer that question in the way that I'm feeling led to answer that question, which is yes or no. But the reality is
There's a yes or no, Jeff. Like
there's context here.
It is straightforward yes or no. There are always options for the context and things like that. Even if you've been here on the channel, context is extremely important. We've had the context. We've seen around, and that's what drives this question. And he refuses, he's just refusing to take any level of responsibility. Oh, ha!
Here. The answer to your question is we encourage people to explore their spiritual, their inner world. And it's just an invitation to explore.
You now hear this crooning tone coming into Jeff's speak. This is not only belittling, but it is also patronizing. He is now talking down to the interviewer. You can hear it. It's like he's talking to a child. We just invite people to explore. You know, that's just what we're doing. We're just inviting some people to explore. And this is another manipulation tactic that he's trying to use. He's now trying to talk down to somebody, an interviewer who is asking very pertinent, pointed, and important questions. He's now trying to talk down to her. He's being belittling and he's being patronizing, and it's so endlessly frustrating.
In the concerns about Twin Flames universe, one of the biggest, most harmful allegations is that you are dictating people's gender and that they are taking it to extreme lengths, including having surgeries and hormone therapies and changing their gender.
Well,
and so I think it's a fair question.
Of course.
That's a yes or a no, and there's not really a ton of nuance in it.
Great.
So is it a yes or a no? Have you told people to change genders?
We've invited people to explore their gender.
So you want to stay with that?
Okay, so non-verbally speaking, I've got to have some non-verbal stuff in this. A lot of everything that's happening non-verbally was discussed in the prior video, so again, go and watch that. This is just highlighting a lot of his continual disgusting verbal manipulation tactics. Non-verbally speaking with that, what he's doing still is this head cocked to the side, this exposing of the neck, and this can be the front of your neck, side of your neck. This exposing in the neck indicates to people that you do not feel threatened by them. And the psychological and evolutionary context for that is that this is a vulnerable area of your body. If you're exposing that, especially in your neck, that lets you know that you do not feel at risk. So he's cocking his head. He's also having a regular contempt smile on his face, which is more activity on one side of the face than the other. And that contempt indicates that the person speaking or displaying the contempt feels a level of intellectual or moral superiority. So he's feeling invulnerable. He's showing contempt. We're seeing the agitation regularly with his manipulators, everything in that realm of things. He feels untouchable. I wish that he did not. Perhaps the law will eventually be able to catch up with him, but as of right now, he doesn't have too much of a reason to not feel invulnerable. Even with backlash, people are still joining Twin Flames universe, and he just sticks to it, and oh my God.
I want to stay with that.
That is the truth. That is the whole truth. That's nothing but the truth.
Okay. And that invitation to explore gender comes from God?
No, it comes from a human talking to a human.
No, but do you get...
Ooh, okay, here again are the clips.
They gave the leadership the list of people. The majority of people that were paired were same-sex, 2 women, and half of them were told that they were now actually the divine masculine. Since I had clients on the list, my job was to contact them and tell them that they had been given a special channeled message from Jeff and Shalia. I knew that this was somehow like a test, like I was being watched to see if I would do it. I didn't know exactly what was to come at the time. I didn't have all the details. I just saw the list of these people.
It's painted out very clearly as this is God speaking to the convenient Jeff and Shalia, and now that's being relayed to everybody else. So yes, it is coming from God in the way that they function, their modality, but his overt, overly displayed disgust and outrage in regards to that statement lets us know that he's really trying to draw separation from that which he can't. There's visual evidence of him doing the opposite of what he's saying here, so that just lets us know that he's desperately trying to lie at this point. It's incredible.
No, but
Like-
do you get the message from God that someone is in the wrong gender?
If you could give me a moment.
Okay, good question. Again, brilliant question from the interviewer. She's doing so much better at maintaining her cool than I am. Presents this question, and he can't figure out how to answer it because he has already presented one storyline, and now he knows that he can't go directly against that because he's already presented the one storyline, so now he's got to sit here. He's gonna need a minute. What we know while we're watching this is that he's scrambling to find an answer that somehow answers and does not paint him out to be responsible on any level. So this is another manipulation tactic. It's similar to the one of him being like, I gotta get up and get some water. It resets the interview. This is him doing the same thing, but now his water's next to him. He can't just be like, I gotta go get some water. Now he's gotta take a minute to do whatever. We're gonna watch that happen.
To collect myself. God is a loving being.
And he comes out the gate with manipulation. That's not what the question at all had to do with anything. The interviewer did not ask, what's your opinion on the character of God? But after taking the space, manipulating by taking control of the flow of a conversation, he then, right out the gate from that manipulation, opens up with a new manipulation talking about the character of God, which is negligible to this specific point.
God wants the best for us. I am not God. I have never claimed to be God.
Here's the clip again.
The image of, the Christ was actually me, the second coming, not Jesus, the first coming.
Glad we're on the same page now, Jeff. Anything else that you want to lie about?
No, I'm not saying that, Jeff. I'm just...
Hold on, let me finish.
Okay.
I've never claimed to be God. I teach people how to have a relationship with God. And God is love. And God is found in your heart. God is found in the love in your heart. And when you have a relationship with the love in your heart, it has a profound transformative impact on your life.
So my question was, do you...
So he falls into it again. Not only is he still doing the whole patronizing tone that we've talked about earlier on, he's also now trying to play around with this word phrasing, and it's all, again, religious, spiritual jargon that he's trying to use. God is love, God is that, and in your heart, and all of this stuff, which I don't know exactly which avenue of belief in God that Jeff is trying to pull off of. If he's trying to pull off of Christianity, so much of what he's saying here goes against what is biblically stated. And if he's trying to pull off of, like, perhaps Catholicism, that also doesn't line up. So maybe this is a new hybrid version of belief in the Judeo-Christian God that exists. It's difficult to say. Nevertheless, everything that he's saying is just him trying to whip out jargon and throw it at people so that he could then feel like he's on top of the situation. And he feels like he did so well because, again, at the end of it, he settles back into contempt again. He at very least thinks that he is smarter than everybody around him, which is also simply not the case. He just wants to be in control on some level in any realm, and this is the way that he's found the easiest way to do so. Because, again, how can you assail that? If God told you something, what are you going to do? Say, no, he didn't? I will. No, he didn't, Jeff. He didn't say that. It's just not happening.
Do you get a message from God about somebody's gender?
It doesn't work that way, no.
There's no channeling from God about what someone's gender should be?
So we as professionals
in a field that doesn't exist. Again, trying to use jargon to be able to add weight behind where there is no weight. This, again, is just manipulation here. Let's see how it plays out.
in our work get intuitive hits, you might say.
This lingo I find very fascinating. I have done a decent amount of research and study into things like mentalism and charlatan psychiatry. And hits is one of the primary things that's referred to during something called cold reading, which cold reading is being able to take generalities and speak it to them in such a way that sounds more specific to them. Instead of it being like, oh, everybody feels this way, it feels much more personal, and it's based off of things like Barnum statements. And it's all centered around hits. Once you speak a Barnum statement, and you get good response to that Barnum statement, it's considered a hit. And then you use that information to tailor it to the rest of your other Barnum statements in cold read that then allows there to be more accuracy throughout. And then by the end, you seem like you have some sort of extra sense to what a person is saying or meaning or believing or feeling, what have you. So the fact that he's saying that he has intuitive hits, to me, having studied that area of behavior, it lets me know that it's a charlatan act. He's pretending, he's playing, which is perfectly fine if you're doing something like mentalism or some onstage act or something along those lines. But in the area where you're actually messing with people's real emotions and real consequences, ooh, that's a huge red flag. You've seen him kind of say that he's getting words from God here. There shouldn't be a hit. There shouldn't be a need to fish. It should just be cold, hard, factual statements. That doesn't make sense with what he's conveying here, so he's going to try to twist it around.
Hey, this might be a good idea. It's explorative. Like this heavy frame is just not the reality.
But Jeff, it's a heavy consequence to have kind of a whim that someone might be a different gender.
It's not a whim.
But what did you just describe it as?
So you talk about having
very overt defensive gesture. It's not a whim. This is placating. This is defensive. Anytime you see palms forward, it's a reflection of stop. You stop people that way. You stop things that way. And he's saying it's not a whim, which goes directly against what he just said with it being an intuitive hit. But then when she says, but you just said that, and then he starts to try to respond, and what's the characteristic emotion across his face during that time? Of course it's contempt. Of course he feels moral or intellectual superiority in this area. I think he feels moral or intellectual superiority to everyone around him. It just goes again into that patronizing, belittling speak that he has had everywhere else.
Having an intuitive, experience. Hey, maybe explore this.
A whim, as some might say. An intuitive experience. Maybe you should do this on a passing whim.
Hey, that might be fun. It's innocent. It's from a creative place. It's from a light place. And we explore these difficult, heavy spiritual concepts, but it's done with lightness. And you're going to go through on the spiritual journey difficult things. We're going to navigate really uncomfortable situations together. And
you hear the agitation in him through the increase in his breathing rate. You can hear the frantic breaths in between what he's saying. That's our indicator of agitation. We're obviously also seeing the hair manipulators come in there. He's had so many lip licks and dry swallows in there, letting us know that he's feeling a dry mouth. There are obvious signs of agitation and anxiety centered around this, also mixed in with the frustration and contempt and scorn that he feels. It's humorous to watch if you're aware of what he's doing. If you're not aware of what he's doing, this is the area that a lot of people start to miss. They end up getting wooed by what he's saying because it sounds so positive. It's exploration, it's inner work, it's tough stuff approached by lighthearted means and blah, 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 blah. The way that he's presenting it is pure cold, hard manipulation.
And that's what we do. That's what our spiritual community supports.
But you see what I'm saying?
That's what we do. So many shrugs in there, insecurity or insincerity. He also has a pretty substantial head dip. That's what our community supports. The head dip in there is also a lack of confidence in there. And then when he comes back up after saying it's what our community supports, he also has a pretty substantial lip compression in there as well. Again, biting back negative words, emotions. It can be even related to when you say something that's not true or shouldn't be said, you see a lip compression in there because it's biting back of that. And so to have that cluster centered around that lets us know that at least on some level, he's trying to blow smoke up everybody's butt at this point. And it's just highlighting more and more and more.
See what I'm saying about you getting an intuition of someone's gender and then the consequence of them hearing that.
I get how this all looks, but it's just not true.
Interviewer's really not letting go of this point because he hasn't answered it at all at this point. He's tried every single manipulation and dodge tactic known to man. But now he's getting frustrated that she won't let it go because he hasn't answered sufficiently. And so now he's interrupting her in the middle of her statement to say, I get how all of this looks, which again is him trying to now take control. He's escalated his volume, he's escalated his pitch and the force behind it. You've seen his eyebrows drawn together and lower, and he's trying to now regain control of this narrative by saying, I get it. I understand all of this stuff. I'm the smart one. It's very obvious.
Not true.
Yeah, I agree with them. It's just the framing of it. Yeah.
It feels unfair to you.
Yeah.
What about golden children?
Another passing idea.
Yeah, it's a passing idea. Just a thought. Just playing around with an idea.
It was a silly idea. And we explored it for a very short period of time and moved on.
Do you think that it's
So the golden child thing, please go and watch the documentaries if you haven't already. That will add just so much knowledge and context to what's being stated here. That golden child thing, they had a child that they believed was going to come into the world and be like this saintly, only dedicated to Christ, which was really weird. They were trying to modify her to be this perfect celibate, more or less, and then they were trying to spread that concept to the people in the following. And so then that obviously caused some backlash. What some people stated it felt like is that they were trying to breed their own kind of human to fit within their cult. And so obviously that's pretty extreme. So that was a passing idea, is their way of just trying to wipe that clean. It wasn't even a big deal. Again, it had heavy effect on the people that were following these two. But again, they're unwilling to accept that they have responsibility in regards to that and in regards to how they treat people or what they tell people to do or to not do. And now we're going to get to a point of this interview that highlights the entirety of the idea of Twin Flames universe. It should be one of the biggest red flags to anybody who's bought into or is involved in this cult.
Do you think that it's possible that you will one day see inviting people to explore the divine masculinity and the divine femininity as a silly idea that you should move away from? That doesn't really be part of your...
Yeah, any of it. There's no sacred cows here. Like even the twin flame concept, like it's okay if it's misproven. I didn't come into this from a spiritual perspective. I grew up Catholic, and I left the religion in the church because of their stance on gay marriage. I felt that if two people loved each other, they should. Sorry.
Okay, I'm going to pause here before he dives into his other manipulation tactic that he has here, which is now the emotional take charge of the situation. Not only does he not have certainty in his little proclamations that he has here about the divine masculine and divine feminine, which is garbage. He's already said, yeah, that could be, in the future, if that became just shown as just an idea, no sweat off my back. Again, after telling people to change their life direction and behaviors on an immense scale, he's saying that it could just be a passing idea, letting us know again the responsibility that he refuses to take in the situation. And then he takes it even further. If the idea of twin flames is disproven, I don't really care. It's just an idea. And that's where it boils down to. It's just an idea, which he himself admits could be disproven, and it's no sweat off of his back. Now he's talking about his theological history, which he said that he was a part of the Catholic Church for a little bit, and then he left because of this reason, and now he's trying to force in some emotions. We'll talk about that in a second. But that also gives us a heads up as to what the theological grounding for this cult is. It is seemingly probably based off of some of the concepts found in Catholicism, or perhaps extraneous Christianity or evangelical Christianity. So we're seeing where his understanding of God has come from, even down to the base level of his theological understanding. It's flawed, which lets us know this isn't from God. There's no constant of this is being spoken by a divine who understood and has had fingers in all of these different pies. This is just his idea that he's trying to present to people in a way that allows him to get money and control. And that's all that it boils down to. So now let's go ahead and watch him try to force some sort of emotional state into this that has not existed before this, but it helps him get control.
Very passionate about this. They should be allowed to get married. It was so painful to leave my church.
So the reason that I'm not buying into this emotional state now is because of how hard it crashed into it. Again, emotions have a profile that you can follow. It's anticipatable. You can see them build and develop unless they're being held back intentionally, which if like somebody's told, don't show any emotion in this area, or they feel like they shouldn't be showing any emotion in that area, that's where you'll see that crash come in. And then that can be a genuine point. You have to pay attention to how the synchronization across the body and face flows with that emotion as it goes through to be able to determine then. That's not the case here. Nobody's encouraged him to not show any emotion. So that lets us know that this hard crash is likely because it's forced, it's being pushed in there. And then along with that, the smaller physiological evidence of there being crying is not showing up. He does not have any inflammation around his eyes or around his nose. You do not hear any mucus being developed. His eyes aren't even watering at this point. The only things that he can possibly wrestle into this fake state of crying is a shaky voice, and it's bad at best, and then he's trying to look away until he can hopefully wrestle up some tears to be involved in this. And what many people will end up doing is they'll force themselves into this emotion, and then they'll start relying on genuine emotions to do dirty work. So they'll think of something that does make them sad, or they'll try to just work themselves up into a place of being sad through forcing the physical tells before they finally get to that point. And then that's how you can see the desynchronization points of somebody who's genuinely experiencing an emotion and being carried along by it, as opposed to somebody who's trying to orchestrate an emotion and push it through. And his are fully orchestrated, nothing's synchronized, and nothing's lining up to the emotional profile.
In my religion because of a disagreement. But I knew what was in my heart. And I followed that with courage. And it led me to a new path. And that new path is beautiful for me.
Why does that make
The new path is so beautiful for him. He gets so much more money and control and power through this path. He left his church because of the church's inability to be accepting and forgiving to people. But now he's found a new path that it just allows him to be so much more rich. What a heartfelt path you found there, Jeff. How kind of you.
Why does that make you so sad?
I loved the Catholic Church. I have so much love for Jesus. And it was so hard for me to leave that all behind.
Hey, he's wrestled out a tear. How kind. But if you notice, where's the point of the tears starting to come up? It's centered around his own self-victimhood. It was so hard for me to leave all of this behind. Tears start flowing. He's feeling sorry for himself, which for anybody who has left a cult or a religion or something along those lines behind, it is extremely hard. You have to uproot your entire community. So many people that you counted as friends or family will turn their backs on you or say that you're an awful being because of this. It is extremely hard and devastating for a person to deconstruct from a cult or a religion that they are no longer a part of. That's what he's relying on now to try to pull out some genuine emotion. Again, it's centered around his own self-victimhood. He's using genuine emotions to do dirty work in this specific area here, as we saw prior to this.
And follow my truth. But it was the right thing to do.
But Jeff, why is this making you so upset?
I loved my church.
But your church didn't have you still could be a part of that church.
No, I didn't agree with its fundamental principles. How could I be a part of something that I don't agree with? And it's okay. Like, I'm not.
There's a lot of churches. And there are a lot of churches that have a lot of different bylaws and a lot of interpretations of the original texts, and you could definitely have found anywhere else that you could have gone to be able to serve that church. There are plenty of options for that, but you didn't do that. Instead, you said, I don't like the way that the church was doing it, so I'm going to start my own. I'm going to make my own church, which is a cult. That's where the problematic behavior comes in there. No, I couldn't go back to there. I didn't agree with them, so I had to start my own thing, which, yeah, huh.
Okay, like, I'm not mad at the church. It has its, the Catholic Church, it has its viewpoint, and I respect it. And I respect why it feels that way. And it led me to exploring different spiritualities, and that was beautiful. It's been nothing but beautiful for my life, but I can't deny how hard it's been. And it led me to this idea about masculine and feminine, that, there is a way that everyone wins, that the LGBTQ plus community can win. And
There is a way that everyone wins, and it's usually when it's up to the individual to decide what their beliefs and their functionality is. That's not what he's supporting. Again, he's supporting, oh, well, I'm going to change some of the words around so that I can be in control of this situation and have people still follow me. That's the issue that we're still having here. I fully support every single person out there believing whatever it is that they want to believe, as soon as they impose that onto any other person and say, this is the way it is especially because of some divine anything. Because that's not testable. That's not provable. And as soon as they say, if you don't do what I say according to my group, then you have negative consequences, then that's no longer accepting and supporting and gracious and open-minded and kind-hearted and all of that. That's control. It's just overt manipulation down to a T.
can win and have agreement here with these, traditional views that it's only a man and a woman.
What's the future for you guys? Is this all going to come crashing down?
No, I think if anything, we're only going to continue to thrive and be a shining light on the world, because I feel very strongly that we have something that's critically important to the world, and it's love. And it's the type of love that everyone desires, or most people desire and yearn for, and that it's here. It's a very practical spirituality that you can apply in your daily life all the time, and it will bring you closer and closer to the divine and just have amazing positive effects on your life.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you getting all misty-eyed?
Oh, I'm thinking about Jesus. Sorry, let me go back to the other.
Okay. I do firmly believe that the twin flames universe cult will be disbanded. But then what I find fascinating from Shalia during that time is she tries to use the one hook that they've got, which is love, as what their grounding is. And that's not their grounding. It's not centered around actual love and acceptance and open-mindedness, because there's so many rules involved in that as well. All of the followers have to do this or don't do this or listen to this or don't listen to this or all of these different things. There's money involved, things like that. So love is the hook that they're trying to use, and acceptance is the hook that they're trying to use, which is where I have so much issue with groups like this, because they prey on hurting people. These groups come in and they're like, oh, well, we have a solution for you. And it's always some sort of detached something that is not tangible. At best, what the people who are hurting will suddenly receive, and what often ropes them in most, is this sense of community. But that community is contingent on belief. If you don't believe what the community believes or think what the community thinks, then you're not actually ever going to be a part of that community. And so that idea of community is only an implementation of control. You get community if you follow the rules. If you don't follow the rules, you're not really a part of the community. And if you really stray from the rules, you're ostracized from that community. For her to then try to say, we will stick around because we support love and that's what we are all about, that's not the totality of what they are. There's so much more behind their little love hook that they put out there. There's more darkness that is behind that. And so inevitably, as people continue to pour into the Twin Flames universe and invest way too much money into these two people, it's going to only highlight the issues. And eventually, whether it's through legal terms or just through the court of public opinion, this cult will have to fizzle out and die. Unless they try to do some sort of twist, which it would not surprise me if they try to twist it around to do something else, to where it's no longer a church, it's no longer the culty vibes that they're doing it, it's some sort of other something or another that they try to do to try to preserve that. So we'll see how that actually plays out here. Now, Jeff is getting misty-eyed again because he is just thinking about how much he loves Jesus, and I guess in a way for him that just means that he's thinking about how much he loves himself, which is cute. That's really cute. That's so fun.
Let me go back to the other part of just thinking about, because it's very healing to address that, to talk about, why I left the Catholic Church and my views on the LGBTQ plus community and, my love for Jesus. Yeah, so just thinking about that.
Are victims, they're not victims, and they're not brainwashed. They're very smart people, and they can choose to be with Twin Flames universe or not be with Twin Flames universe. And the love and support is quite overwhelming. Like, they love it. They love the work, and they're here because they know that what they receive just benefits their life, like, completely.
That's where I'm wrapping up that interview. That at the end there makes me extremely mad. The victims, they're not victims. People that we've brainwashed, they're not brainwashed. They all love it here. They're so happy. That's why these documentaries exist, is because of how everybody is just so happy with it. That's why all this footage exists of us being belligerent assholes exists. It's because of how happy everybody is. Everybody's having a great time and everybody loves us and loves the work. I agree wholeheartedly that the people that are involved in and have been sucked into the Twin Flames cult are indeed intelligent people. I think the issue is that they are also hurting people, desperate people, lonely people. And those people are so easily preyed upon. So easily preyed upon. All that you have to do is offer solutions to their needs. They're lonely? Oh, you can have some friends. You're feeling desperate? We'll add some hope into this. You're feeling lost? Here's some guidance for you. You just start offering those solutions and then suddenly you have them. And it doesn't matter if the solutions that you offer actually hold up in longevity, because you just have to get them in. You only have to get them into your little group, and then you could start indoctrinating. You could start changing the way that they perceive the world in a way that only builds dependence. It seems to be fairly straightforward. If your behavior doesn't cause damage to the people around you, then, you're probably going to be okay. But that's not what is ever taught in these areas. It's always taught that you need some sort of extrinsic something to tell you what to do, and if you don't, then you're probably wrong and you're probably going to do something bad because you yourself are bad. And it's all centered around manipulation and control. That's their entire mantra: is you can have happiness, you can have love, you can have community, you can have support as long as you do what we say and think what we think. Throughout this, again, we saw all of the same nonverbal patternings that we saw in the last video, of the aggression, the contempt, the manipulators, the anxiety, all of it showed up again repeatedly. This video, again, focused much more on what their verbal manipulation tactics were and the issues that were around that, and highlighting the difficulties in what they're saying so that hopefully people who might feel like they're drawn towards something like the Twin Flames universe can start thinking critically about it and realize that this isn't going to support them. Not the way that they're wanting to. It will only support them in the way that the cult or the organization itself wants to support. And that usually comes with bylaws, that usually comes with rules, that usually comes with some form of guideline where if broken, there is negative consequence and repercussion for it. And again, it all boils down to control and money. Sorry about how angry I got in this and how frustrated and how obviously biased it came across in many areas of this. I honestly didn't want to try to come across unbiased in very many areas of this because it seemed too egregious to do so. And if I had, I would have felt like I was enabling. As all of my videos here on the internet are though, however, this is just my educated opinion. None of this should be used on any level as any form of professional or legal evidence in any way. But without further ado, that's all that I've got for the day. My name is Logan and you have been oh so awesome as you always are. And I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.